Hey guys, welcome to another MapleStory 2 video, and today's going to be a bit of an old favorite of mine known as Top 5, where I tell you guys which classes in MapleStory are doing the best right now, and I did a lot of this in MapleStory 1, so I plan to do this in MapleStory 2 as well. Even though there aren't too many classes to choose from in MS2, and even though all the classes are balanced around the same from a general standpoint, there are still a few classes that perform noticeably better in some aspects than others. And today I'll be making a video on which classes are currently the best damage-wise. With the advent of Chaos Raids, 10-man party raid damage contribution charts have been released, and since the past month or so, we've gotten more and more adjusted to knowing which classes can definitely dish out more DPS than others. Now bear in mind, I want to place an initial disclaimer since I know there might be some misunderstandings here. While the 5 classes I choose in this video are stronger in damage than the other 4, that doesn't mean that the other 4 classes are weak or underpowered. This is just purely from a damage standpoint, so aspects like defense and utility will not be involved unless said attributes supplement your damage. However though, if you stick around to the end of the video, I will go over why I didn't choose the other 4 classes for a little bit of explanation on my thought process. Also, to anyone who will be posting this in the comments section, should remember that power is determined from a case-by-case basis. If you're really skilled on a weaker class versus a person who has no idea what they're doing playing a stronger class, naturally you'll be doing more since you know your class so well. It's not the wand, it's the wizard. It's not the sword, it's the swordsman. A weapon is only as good as the one who wields it. These classes are just simply a bit stronger in concept and on paper, not in actual practice because there are too many other variables and circumstances. Okay, so having said that, let's get into the video starting in no particular order with Berserker. Berserkers easily take a spot on this list. While they're probably the most ungraceful class you'll ever see in your life, they make up for it by being one of, if not the most powerful melee class in the game. They're a short-range close-quarters warrior class with a heavy emphasis on front-loaded damage and can suffice to meet expectations as both a solo player and in parties. Since Berserkers have incredibly high spirit recovery to allow for ceaseless attacking, and their natural built-in sustain will mean that they can afford to take hits that squishier classes would otherwise have to dodge. And not needing to stop attacking to move and avoid attacks means you can stick around and do more damage. As I mentioned earlier, Berserkers are no shy of base damage, as not only do their attacks have respectable numbers, but you can get even stronger by meeting certain conditions. Abilities like Blood Price, Dark Might, and Warrior's Instinct give boosts in all offensive stats, damage, physical attack, and even piercing, some of the most valuable stats in the game. Even without much equipment, you can reach high numbers on Berserkers, which also means they're a very beginner-friendly class to play. The majority of Berserkers' damage is front-loaded, which means their class is centric around single instance damage and doesn't leave much in terms of attack speed. A lot of their attacks are slow and have long animation times, and while the DPS is far from being bad, you can easily find yourself struggling to keep up with enemies as opposed to faster and more fluid classes like Assassin and Ranger. While skills like Groundbreaker and Void Slash have great base damage, the main issue is landing your skills, and many mobs in MapleStory 2 they don't know how to stand still. But assuming you don't run into those types of issues, Berserkers can effortlessly outpace backline DPS classes who would usually have to take time in between attacks to avoid enemy counterfire, while you get to face tank pretty much anything. Well, within reason, of course. All in all, Berserkers aren't the flashiest class on the roster, but they don't care because they can destroy everything in their path, a top-tier melee class and a valuable one to have in parties despite not really having anything to share with their teammates. Heavy Gunners are the underdog little sibling compared to their often more popular sister class Ranger. By the way, I know their official class name is Archer, but I like to call them Ranger just because Ranger was the 3rd job Archer class in MapleStory 1. If Berserker gets the crown for the best frontline physical damage dealer, Heavy Gunner gets first place for backline physical damage dealing. These guys are armed with a ton of DPS for the team, and if given enough leeway and to some extent protection, they can carry you through a lot of difficult content. While Rangers prefer to be light on their feet and focused on speed, Heavy Gunners like to plant themselves onto the ground and dish out high power from a safe distance, and unlike Rangers, Heavy Gunners can clear waves as fast as they can damage, with most of their damage dealing abilities being able to hit multiple targets such as Electric Blast, M-Bomb, and Rocket Launcher. They're not without their extra tools though. Being a weapons expert, Heavy Gunners come with a decent amount of offensive utility, with attacks like Magnetic Bomb, Stun Grenade, and even a first aid kit for good setup and sustain. No, seriously, why the hell do they have a skill that lets them drop health packs and no other class has this? Well, I mean, whatever it is, Heavy Gunners are also very friendly for beginners to play with since their skills are relatively linear in terms of application and have good base stats, and they do come with a lot of passive skills that increase the damage of a ton of their abilities. So this means you can tinker around with which builds you want to go. Regardless of which one you pick, you'll be seeing very consistent performance. But unlike Berserker, Heavy Gunners aren't very forgiving to careless players, having possibly the lowest defense and HP of any physical damage dealing class, outside of maybe like Thief or Assassin. They take equally as much damage as they can dish out, so you'll have to make sure you reposition and watch for enemy attacks. Even having the longest range in the game, you still have to dodge some fire or else you can go from really powerful to completely useless. Putting it all together though, you have a fun class with good numbers and underrated potential. Anyone interested in being a solid attack damage carry can meet success with this class. Aha, I bet you didn't expect to see Runebladers here, did you? Now let me explain why I did, since Runebladers aren't usually looked at as one of the top damage classes, so let's get started. Runebladers are a very interesting class. They deal less overall damage than a Berserker, and they're not nearly as defensive as a Knight, but despite being a warrior class, Runebladers are incredibly fast and versatile, being probably the most entertaining warrior class. Runebladers' best aspect is that of their variety of skills to use in any situation, and that's also why they have such balanced numbers. Runebladers don't excel in any particular field, their damage is admirable, but not spectacular. They can do a lot of damage in a short amount of time, but below some other classes. Their DPS is something to write home about, but not top in their class. So why is a jack-of-all-trades unit like Runeblader deserving of a top-level spot, at least in the damage department? While they cover a lot of situations, they are able to switch elements, they have a multitude of skills with a distinct function from each other, like Gravity Rune, Impact, Blade Chasm, Illusory Blades, and Warding Rune. It gives Runebladers a little bit of everything that they need to perform in any fight. I said their damage isn't the most powerful, but having a good set of abilities to properly chain off each other, such as Echoing Blades and Whirling Blades, mean Runebladers can consistently maintain streams of damage due to the fact that they can switch from close quarters combat to long distance attacking whenever needed. And of course, I won't be forgetting one of their best abilities. I forgot about it during my What Classes Should You Play video, but they have Honing Runes, an incredible party buff that boosts critical damage by a percentage, allowing for great synergy with Ranger and Assassin, who both rely on critical damage. And if you can get both Runeblader and Ranger in a party, Sharp Eyes and Honing Runes can significantly increase overall damage per second. Despite Runebladers having a lot of offensive options, they give warriors kind of a bad name in the defensive department. Even with protective properties like Warding Rune and Rune Focus, you shouldn't expect to last very long on the front lines, which means you can easily run yourself ragged if you're not careful. Also, while their spirit regeneration skill is one of the best in the game, Runebladers are very spirit heavy, so you will have to micromanage that as well. A bit more fun to play than a Berserker in my opinion, and a bit faster than them, but with just less brute force. Runebladers also scale exceptionally well, since classes that focus on speed get more benefit from higher level gear and whatnot. Last two classes, I'm sure they're going to be pretty obvious at this point, but we have Assassin. Assassins are beasts in the damaging department, having no shortage of equal parts burst and consistent damage. Being a mid-range fighter with exceptional mobility, Assassins make up for their lackluster defense and HP by being light on their feet. You can dodge a lot of deadly attacks that come your way and have a lot more legroom with your attacks than, for instance, a Heavy Gunner, although maybe not as much clear speed. What makes Assassin really strong is in their build options. The two best ones right now are either single target DPS or Deathmark Focus, both of which are important to have. Single target DPS Assassins capitalize on Fatal Strikes, a buff that sets your critical hit rate to 100%, the only buff that can do this, meaning every single attack you do will critically strike, and with consistent streams of damage through Lucky Stars, Star Flurry, Star Chaser, and Shadow Cutter, that alone brings Assassin's burst damage to almost equal that of Berserkers, even if it's only for a short amount of time. On the other hand, the Deathmark build is a more team-friendly build as it increases the damage targets under 30% HP take from all sources, not just your own. Consequently, that means Assassins can actually have actual presence in team compositions. Not that this really has anything to do with the class's strength, but Assassins are also a very flashy class, and satisfying to play when played well. A lot of their attacks have serviceable base damage and fast speed. You can very well throw a ton of attacks out in fast succession and then quickly reposition to avoid counterfire. The fluidity of the class lets you keep your damage rating quite high all across the board at the expense of maybe a few things. Like Runebladers, who are speed oriented, Assassins have high spirit costs in some of their abilities, and even though they have many options in fights, they can only do one option at a time, well, for the most part. Assassins excel in single target combat, but do poorly in the mobbing aspect, as most of their abilities that can hit multiple targets either drain your spirit like crazy or have decently long cooldowns. Additionally, they have a high skill cap, not as much as their counterpart Thieves, but you still need to know how to chain your abilities together for optimal damage, rather than just face rolling on your keyboard whenever possible. Assassins are super squishy, so if you want to keep yourself alive, your feet better not be touching the ground. Probably one of the most interactive range classes and very fun to finesse with, Assassins secure a spot as one of the best damage dealers in the game. Let me just say it right now, Wizards are probably the best class in the game. They have it all: incredible base damage, front-loaded damage, consistent damage, good skill chaining, clear speed, enemy crowd control, party utility, mobility. Every good party has at least one or two wizards. These guys are insane. Like Runebladers, wizards can choose from 3 elements: fire, ice, and lightning, although players like to lock into one specific element, with Runebladers choosing lightning and wizards often choosing fire. Almost all of Wizards' major damage dealing attacks have insane base damage for how fast they can come out, and they can wave clear as well. Since fire is the main element of choice, let me show you a few of Wizards' numbers. Flame Wave deals up to 292% damage, which then burns enemies for another 390% over 10 seconds. at the cost of only 20 spirit, over 600% damage on any single ability. Another ability they have, Flame Tornado, dishes out 232% damage every third of a second for 1.5 seconds, for a grand total of 1160% damage in less than 2 seconds. The ability does cost 40 spirit and has a decent cooldown, but it just goes to show you exactly how much power this class is loaded with. Not to mention, both skills can attack multiple targets, which means wizards have great wave clear. Their other abilities focus on augmenting their damage, such as Pyromancy, Chiromancy, Electromancy, and Elemental Master, which buffs elemental damage even further. Wizards also come with an incredible party buff, Focus Seal, having a similar buff mechanic as Runebladers, in which they plant a field on the ground, but instead of buffing critical damage, which is good but really conditional, wizards can buff the entire party's physical and magic attack, which is more general application. Their great range, strong damage and attack speed, and just as fast clear speed make them one of the most overtuned classes in the game, but they're not without some weaknesses if we want to just nitpick a little. Like most backline classes, wizards are squishy and cannot last very long when it comes to survival. Their skilled magic armor grants them a shield for a percentage of their maximum health, but wizards have low defense and HP, which means that shield ain't going to be protecting you too much. Additionally, wizards can be quite difficult to play in the spirit department. I did call them a beginner-friendly class because they're really strong and don't require much to perform well, but until you learn how to chain your abilities, you'll find yourself running out of spirit often. You'll find yourself running out of spirit quite often, just like assassins, but assuming you can keep your uptime consistently high, expect to be one of the top damage dealing classes right next to the likes of Berserker. At the moment, I would say Wizard is the strongest class in the game, although not by too much, so don't worry to the rest of the other classes. So now you might be wondering why Priest, Knight, and Thief and Ranger were left out. Well, Knight and Priest are not meant to be high damage dealers, since you rely more on their utility and crowd control as well as their party augmenting abilities to essentially do more damage by proxy. That's not to say that Knight and Priest cannot do good damage, they most certainly can, but that's not their main focus. As for Ranger and Thief, Rangers are strong. Watch Marksman Brian, he makes Rangers look like top DPS in the game. But their offensive focus is purely on attack speed, which makes them not necessarily the best class in the mid game for damage. Plus, Rangers have a lot of utility based skills in their kit to make it easier for them to do that, however, their main damage dealing attacks don't do that much. Rangers often clash with Assassins for both being critical attack based classes with strong focus on attack speed and single target damage, but currently Assassins perform just a little bit better in the damage department. However, Rangers have Sharp Eyes, another valuable party buff that boosts critical rate and accuracy. But right now, Rangers are more of a utility version of Assassins. They do have damage, they're not too far behind the 5 strongest classes, but at the moment just barely shy of making the list in terms of strength. As for Thieves, Thieves have the potential to do the highest damage in the game. I'm not joking, Thieves can do more damage than even Wizards or Berserkers, but the only issue is that Berserkers and Wizards get their damage out without any contingencies or stipulations, while Thieves have too many variables that need to be checked, too many conditions that have to be perfect, and just too many aspects that are circumstantial for their damage to even match the former two. Compounded by the fact that they're a melee class with low defense and HP makes this class extremely hard to play. Not one of those classes that rewards you for your efforts, but rather you just need to do too much for how little you actually can get. Thieves can work, don't get me wrong. Some players make them work a lot, but the amount of effort you have to put into the class is just not worth the payoff. Conditional damage is never as good as available damage for the sole purpose that conditional damage has the chance of failing while available damage does not. Anyways, that wraps up for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed watching, and to all Knights, Thieves, and Priests and Rangers out there, don't be discouraged in your class choice. All 9 classes in MapleStory are good in one way or another, and they're not too far apart from each other. This isn't necessarily meant to be a tier list, but more of a which classes are great candidates at least for doing damage. I'll be making a video on which classes are the most useful next, so I want you guys to stay tuned for that. If you picked any of these 5 classes I mentioned, let me know in the comment section below whether you agree with my reasons for choosing said class, and of course be sure to stay tuned for future top 5s. I plan to make more top 5 videos when they release Striker and Soulbinder because I'm sure they're going to shake up the meta quite a bit. Thanks again so much for watching, and I'll see you guys all again in the next video. Take care.